You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Solana, Doge, and more. Cryptocurrencies and digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity, provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments throughout the world's leading crypto derivatives markets. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of crypto derivatives. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again to dive deep into the world of crypto derivatives. See what's popping off in those markets out there from a volume, a skew, all sorts of fun perspectives out there. Yes, it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown. Coming back at you after a hiatus last week for the Memorial Day holiday. Don't blame me. All the holidays seem to fall on Crypto Rundown Day. Crypto Rundown takes the brunt of it out there, but we're back and rearing to go. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the OptionsInsider.com, as well as from the network upon which all you folks are having fun over the holiday weekend as well, and over this weekend as well. Of course, a lot of fun stuff hitting there. Pro Q&As, options oddities every week. Giveaways coming up on time to give away the May Pro Trading Crate. I think we'll do that on Boot Camp this week, so look forward to that on Wednesday, as well as, of course, all the stuff that's been hitting from OIC. More to come. It's crazy. We did a lot of stuff down there. It's already hitting the pro, a lot of it. It will be trickling out over the on-demand side as well. So if you couldn't make it down to Asheville, I know most of you can't, or just not interested, but you want to hear what's going on down there, then, of course, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is a place to go, and you can stay tuned on the on-demand side. That will be trickling out over the coming weeks as well out there. Some of it already hitting, including some great presentations from our buddy, the Flow Master out there, talking about the state of the options industry, all the data, all the flow out there. Fascinating stuff. Check it out wherever you're listening to this fine podcast. And of course, if you want the pro, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. As we see who's joining us on the old program today in the old crypto hot seat, pleased to be joined once again by our old friend. It's been a little bit. Mr. Greg Magadini from Amberdata. Mr. Greg, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to be here.
How are things in Amberdata land, sir?
Oh, yeah. Things are moving quite a lot. Very excited to see everything that's going on, especially the approval of the spot Ether ETF. I think that was pretty big. And so I'm excited to see where the crypto vol space takes us, including sort of the TradFi spot ETFs markets getting some options in the near future, hopefully here. So it'll be great to see how this space grows.
Yeah, a little ETH ETF love since the last time we chatted, which is, of course, interesting. Also, you folks always cranking out some interesting stuff as well. You've been busy since the last time I chatted with you, Greg, including rolling out something cool called AmberLens. What is AmberLens? What are we working on over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of speaking of the spot ETF flows, so AmberLens has a spot ETF flows charts and metrics, but it's actually kind of a broader front end for everything that's Amberdata data set related that is beyond just derivatives. So we have like Bitcoin on-chain metrics, Ethereum on-chain metrics, level 2 blockchain metrics, stablecoin metrics, and then the spot ETF flows, which we can just monitor on chain directly, so we can see like the Fidelity wallet and things like that. How are the wallets accumulating or distributing Bitcoin, so we can see like the on-chain flows to those ETFs. So that's something that's very interesting. And just for anyone who is new to us, basically, I started Genesis Volatility which was crypto options focused, and then we got acquired by Amberdata, which is a more holistic crypto data company, including blockchain data, DeFi data, spot market data, so on and so forth. And so we had the derivatives GUI and front end, but Amberdata didn't have a front end for the rest of its data assets. And so AmberLens is that front end for everything else.
There you go, listeners. Check it out for yourselves if you want that snapshot into what else is popping off in the world of crypto, as it's time for us to keep on rolling with the show right on into the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown. It's like the live chat's having fun already. With crypto, I like to see that out there. Even if you're like Uncle Mike, maybe you're not a fan of crypto out there. There's enough volume and volatility, certainly. That's really, the end of the day, all an options trader needs. You need a little vol and you need a little volume to be able to trade it. You need some liquidity. If you have those two things, that's pretty much all an options trader needs. And you can certainly argue that Bitcoin delivers on at least those fronts, and indeed crypto as well. Speaking of the big dog, which is Bitcoin, looking a little bit bigger than it was this time last show, listeners. We're at 68,700. Remember, that goes back 2 weeks ago now. This week, 69,375. So in Bitcoin terms, that's kind of a gentle drift higher. It's not the explosive shotgun move we've seen of late out there. It's kind of nice, gentle drift. We are heading into the start of summer. It's June now. Hard to believe it's June already. You're kind of flying by in some regards out there. But intriguing stuff as we go around the horn. Up nearly 700 handles, 675 handles from where we were this time 2 weeks ago on the show here, listeners. The high coming very close together, the highs and the lows. The low is pretty much right around the time of our last show, 66,000, pretty much even. And the high was close to 72K, 71,946. Of course, a lot of that getting caught up in the ETH euphoria out there. Everyone loving ETH. Hopefully we'll see some material action on that front sometime soon. But a lot to unpack. Greg, you alluded to it at the top of the show. There a lot going on since the last time we chatted. A gentle drift north over the last few weeks in Bitcoin, sir. What's catching your eye out there?
Yeah, so I still kind of view Bitcoin. So there's kind of two underlying principles that I view Bitcoin in right now. One is we're kind of still in this consolidation zone between, call it 65 to 70. And then I still think, Bitcoin is hovering at all-time highs. So my delta bias is definitely long here, but my vol biases, we're probably not going to see like explosiveness anytime soon, but we might just see like a drift higher in prices. But fundamentally speaking, a lot of the events are behind us as well. The spot Bitcoin ETF is behind us. The halving is behind us. And then if I look at seasonal realized volatility over the past 13 years, or actually going back to 2013, so over the past 10 years, really February and November are the two most volatile months, historically speaking. And then July, August, September, October is the least volatile months, historically speaking. So we're kind of just going into that summer lull and early fall lull in terms of realized volatility, at least if the historical seasonal patterns hold. And so, that combined with the fundamentals being behind us, and then this, technically speaking, we're kind of looking like we're in a consolidation range. I think, vol is going to disappoint going forward, but I think spot prices actually look good. And I think the fundamental picture for spot prices looks good as well.
Look at you diehard holdler out there, just talking up a little BTC. You mentioned at the top of the show, you were looking ahead to some of the options on some of these ETFs that have been approved. Are you hearing any scuttlebutt out there? Because I will say this, Greg, when I was talking to folks down at the OIC conference a few weeks ago, that's one of the questions I brought up to everyone is, what are you hearing on the Bitcoin options front? And the scuttlebutt I was hearing from them was not good, sir. They were hearing not just a question of this year, but a question of if entirely. The SEC doesn't seem to be really too down with this prospect. So are you hearing more optimistic stuff behind the scenes, sir?
Yeah, that's a great point. So obviously we had a decision delay back in April to here to June. And then the SEC is a little bit pessimistic on crypto, but I thought that for the ETH ETF as well, and that kind of just turned around. So I think there's a little bit of unpredictability here, but kind of larger picture speaking, the other assets that are Bitcoin related, such as BITO, already have options. BITX, which is a 2x BITO, already has options. Then we have the ETH BITO, which already has options. And so I'd be very surprised that we don't get options on these products. That it just doesn't make sense to me, especially if all the derivative products or derivative-based ETFs also have options on them. The logic just kind of doesn't make sense to me to not have it on the spot ETFs.
I never said the regulators make sense to me, sir. They will approve an underlying, but buying a put on said underlying to hedge it, that is verboten. That is not allowed. So yeah, we're still in this kind of seem like almost pre-2000 mindset when it comes to regulating derivatives. But that's a conversation for another day. If you want to hear what folks are saying on that exact topic, listen, you should be checking out the content we're posting out there from OIC. Again, I put that exact question to the folks out there making the decisions and talking to the regulators, the folks at the exchanges, the brokerage firms, the trading firms, everything else. So some interesting insights, some varying opinions, not all dire, but a lot of them, unfortunately, leaning towards the dark side. Let's see if our friends on the vol front are leaning to the dark side. Again, all this data we're going to talk about and a lot more, listeners, available over there. Amberdata.io. The place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. If you did that, you would see that the weekly vol out there in Bitcoin right now gently coming in over the last couple of weeks, which again, it's the start of summer. As Greg pointed out, a lot of the big events we were kind of waiting and hoping for are kind of behind us. Expected to have maybe a little bit of a gentle drift in vol. And that's pretty much what we're seeing. We're at a 51 on the show 2 weeks ago, 47.5 today. So that's a 7-day vol. You might think that sounds a little bit light. You get a little bit farther out, things get a little bit frothier out there. Let's go out to a more standardized vol metric 30 days. That was nearly a 56 on our last show, 55.85. That one also coming in as well, coming in exactly 4.5 points, 51.35 right now. So again, that gentle vol drift continuing. And let's go out 6 months. Let's go out 180 days. Let's see what the hodlers are up to, listeners. The Greg and companies out there. 66.80 on the last show, 63. So coming in almost 4 points out there as well. Greg, any surprises for you on the vol front, or are you kind of also expecting a little bit of, let's say, gentle vol drift heading into the start of the summer?
Yeah, I think definitely gentle vol drift for Bitcoin. Obviously, the big surprise was with the Ethereum space, and we'll jump into that on the next section. But I think for Bitcoin, everything is kind of surprise free, in my opinion. If we look at the variance risk premium, 7 days still has a decent premium. 7-day implied over realized is about 11 points of premium. So if I look at the 7-day implied around 47, the 36 the 7-day realized around 36. So that's kind of interesting to me. There's definitely a good argument to be made there that, buying vol is kind of disappointing, especially if you do it unhedged here. But I think the bigger play will be in the Ethereum space when we chat about that.
Indeed. A little bit of a tease there, listeners. We'll get into ETH in a second. First, let's keep rolling out to the skew. Let's see what the Bitcoin options are pricing in terms of looking down the road a little bit, shall we? Let's start weekly, as we are wont to do, and move our way out. Last week, or I should say last show, we were looking a little bit positive on the weekly front, about 2.5 points. Again, nothing to write home about. And it's coming a little bit again this show as well. It's about 0.75 of a point now. So again, coming in about 1 3/4 points out there. Not a huge move on the skew front. 30-day skew coming in as well. Nearly a 5 on the last show. 4 3/4 to be precise. Coming in to start the show today about exactly a 1. So coming in about 3 3/4 points there. And going out 6 months, same deal. Kind of that gentle vol drift kicking in there as well. It was a 6.15 to be precise on the show 2 weeks ago. And about 3 3/4 coming in. So still biased to the upside across the board, but a little bit lighter than it was this time 2 weeks ago. Greg, anything catching your eye on the old BTC skew front these days, sir?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the BTC skew is kind of this interesting thing that we've seen since 2023, which is basically, calls are typically skewed over puts, especially in the long dated stuff where that dynamic holds persistently true. And so once we saw that flip back in 2023, it kind of made Bitcoin options being priced as a little bit of a safe haven. And so in my mind here, if we're kind of looking at maybe the 60 to 90 days out, where the skew, the short end could do anything, but when the short end's negative and the long term is positive, the 90-day and the 60-day will be around even. That's really interesting in this type of environment where there's like the macro picture has a lot of potential reasons for Bitcoin explosive upside, whether it's political uncertainty, whether it's inflation data, whether it's geopolitical risk. Those have all been very positive vol events for Bitcoin, causing Bitcoin to spike higher with a lot of volatility. And so in my mind, if you can start getting skew, if you can buy skew at even, meaning calls and puts are about evenly priced, there's some sort of like implicit insurance there. So I like owning the call upside in Bitcoin, especially if I can get it at an even pricing versus the put. And so I think those relationships hold going long term, and those are great opportunities to get some Bitcoin optionality.
That is usually a good do, as they say, on the Bitcoin front, because you're right. The call is usually a little bit juicy in Bitcoin land. So if you can get them, get it on even money. There are definitely worse things. Let's see if there are worse things out there on the ETP front. Let's start in BITO land. Then maybe we'll get wild because Greg's on the show. We'll get a little BITX on the show as well. Why not? Well, let's start in BITO. 2620, down about 1.6 points. So taking a bit of a hiatus after reaching some loftier levels earlier, of course. Again, getting caught up in all the ETH approval euphoria. ADV coming in as well, 83,000 contracts. That's down 12,000 from our last show 2 weeks ago. I got a feeling it's going to be moving, though, after today, because they're putting up some numbers today. 101,000 contracts on the tape today. So they are lighting it up today. The vol kind of holding steady, down about a point. So again, that gentle vol drift kind of kicking in across the board. It was at a 61 on our last show 2 weeks ago and at a 60 right now. So coming in a whopping 1 point over the last couple of weeks. You might be wondering what's lighting it up out there today. It looks like we got some action on the June 27s expiring this week. So a little bit of a weekly play out here. About 8,000 going up this week. Now, normally I see that, I'd say, okay, crypto folks are hodlers and they just buy upside all the time. Looks like a lot of these going up kind of on the bid there. So looks like some folks may be overwriting some of these 27s, including a big block of about 1,750 going up on the bid for about 38 cents this morning. So 27s, I mean, these were in the money not too long ago, listeners. You like overriding these, maybe getting a little bit of extra yield out there in the near term. Greg, is that a strategy? You just talked about buying your upside. I know in general you're long over time out there in Bitcoin. What about harvesting a little bit of near-term premium, getting a little bit of weekly yield? Is that something you like out there? Could be in BITO, could be in the traditional Bitcoin options. Is that an approach you like?
So I think in BITO, that's a great point. So if you ever want to sell upside call vol, BITO is the place to do it. So to me, the biggest thing with BITO is that insane dividend. So for example, we get a dividend almost every month in BITO. And so just the May 1st dividend was $1.68. And so, get 12 of those, that's $12 on something that's worth $26. You're just never going to cross the short call strike, most likely. Especially if you're already like a true Bitcoin holder, harvesting some premium by selling BITO calls, very interesting place to do it, especially since we don't have other sort of equity ETFs with options on them. Just kind of the only place to buy optionality is BITO. So there's kind of a natural bid for buying BITO options, and then taking the other side of that sort of natural bid, because you're discounting that dividend coming out is a great kind of strategy in my mind. So yes, if there's a place to sell Bitcoin vol, upside vol, BITO's the place to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've been talking about this for a while, and you're right. That dividend is just, you can't ignore it when trading options. It's so enormous. Normally, you talk about a dividend, you talk about maybe a couple of percent over the course of a year. You're not talking 20, 30, 40%. It's just the dividend in BITO is a different beast, which always makes me wonder when these folks, like the number one position still in BITO options are the Jan 30s, 108,000 of those now. Those have been getting acquired over time. I talked about that before, not my favorite trade, just in BITO because of that dividend. It weighs so heavily on these calls. So intriguing stuff. You like that, listener? Selling a little bit of near-term premium. You're not happy enough with the dividend. Of course, also, if you're doing it this early in the cycle, that's when around the dividend payable date is. So I could see someone getting into BITO just to collect that dividend, overwriting a weekly call against it so they get out either way and they add a little bit of extra premium to it. I admit I've done that myself before once or twice. So it's not a bad time to be doing that trade, which is why certainly probably we're seeing a lot of that paper going up. But Greg, I mentioned you're on the show today, so let's get into one of your favorites out there as well. You mention it whenever you're on. This is BITX. So listeners, if BITO a little bit too plain vanilla for you, want to get levered, you want to get a little wild and crazy, let's say 2x BITO, well then BITX is your huckleberry. 45.10 right now, up $2.10 just today, so popping hard, nearly 5%, but again, it is a levered product. That's what it's supposed to do. If you're wondering, ADV is about 14,000 contracts, so it's not lighting the world on fire volume-wise, but it's also not 200 contracts. You can get some stuff off out here if you're a little bit diligent on what you're looking at out here. In terms of today, we're going to hit that probably, about 13,000 contracts right now. In terms of size positions in BITO, oh, this is interesting. The Jan 70s, Greg, 7,100 of those are open. It's like they were mostly bought. I'll have to go back and see if I could find when. I don't know. That's a challenge, but I'll go dig in a little bit later. But Jan 2026, long-term in the money puts in BITX. Greg, is that all you? Did you buy 7,000 of 70 puts expiring in 2026 in BITX? And tell the folks why you're such a fan of this one.
That wasn't me, but I think I understand the trade. So it's kind of interesting. So BITX is 2 times BITO essentially. And so one of the things about the 2x ETFs, this has been a problem that's been around forever, but it's just basically, essentially a mathematical artifact, is that if you have a 2x product, when you drop in value, you always drop from a higher denominator than when you rally in value. So, if your portfolio loses 50% of its value, it takes 100% increase to get back to even. Well, those same things happen with the 2x ETF products. And so if the ETF loses 10%, 2x is 20%. Well, it takes 25% to get back to even. And so there's just kind of this natural decay factor. Now, what's really interesting is that a high volatility product like Bitcoin, which has high vol, suffers a lot more from this type of impact, because it's kind of like making the one-day drop or the decay effect. It accelerates, it speeds it up. So instead of like a low vol product like SPY, for example, which has a vol of 14, Bitcoin has a vol of essentially 42, so 3 times the vol. Well, every day that it goes down and then comes back up, in Bitcoin, it's like 3 times that effect of the 2x SPY ETF, that decay factor. So high volatility products suffer from this a lot. And so what's really interesting with this type of instrument is you got to think, okay, in crypto, most of the flows want to buy optionality. So there's often a variance risk premium in crypto anyways. And so then you have the variance risk premium plus the decay. It creates a really favorable sort of upside vol selling opportunity, just like in BITO, but for kind of accelerated reasons. And so you can use this type of product and those types of strategies against sort of a long-term hodling strategy in your portfolio.
This is interesting. It's analogous to that vol erosion play we talk about a lot on vol views, a lot of those other vol ETPs, but clearly more aggressive. I did some digging while you were talking, Greg. This is not an old trade. This went up a few weeks ago, May 21st. They did it 6,000 times. They paid $52.30 for these puts. So a different way to go about this trade, certainly a lot more capital intensive. We're used to seeing out of the money, near out of the money puts going up in some of these vol ETPs as a lower cost way to do this same thing. But this person, they're going straight for the jugular, Greg. $53 puts almost, expiring in Jan of 2020. Do you like it that way, that capital intensive a way to do it?
Typically, that's not how I would structure it, but I understand the logic. If you want to look to like a comparable product, sorry, before I jump to that, one more thing to keep in mind is also that, you know, BITO has essentially a contango decay built into it as well. And so BITX captures twice that futures contango decay in it. But if you want to look at an instrument that has the same type of property, look at BOIL. BOIL is a natural gas 2x ETF, performance ETF that rolls into the future. So it has, natural gas is a volatile product, so it has those same elements as BITX, and it also has that contango, that futures contango, just like BITX does. And if you look at that thing on like a 2-year chart, I mean, that does nothing but go down long term. It just goes straight down to loses 99% of its value, then reverse splits 10-1, and then loses 99% of its value again. So the BITX trader is essentially betting on that. But I understand your point. It's it's a capital intensive trade. You're locking up 50 cents up to gain 70 cents. Best case scenario, that is definitely pretty capital intensive.
Yeah, that's not the way I would go about it, but intriguing stuff. Hey, everyone has their own approach here. Speaking of our own approach, you got our chat, Age Del Quere, saying he doesn't like trading dividends with calendars. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it was technically a calendar, but it wasn't options I was talking about doing with BIT. I was talking about actually having the underlying so you have to capture that dividend, obviously, and then selling the aggressive near-dated call because I didn't really want to hold the position that long anyway. So not really a calendar. It was more of a weekly covered call, but analogous to what you're talking about. If you're doing it with calendars, you're right, it does get a little bit more challenging. It can be done, but a little bit more challenging. I prefer to just go straight for the stock and then aggressively write the calls. You're getting that nice premium on it, and then you're getting that dividend on top of it. Not a bad little 1-2 punch, as long as you don't get the, obviously, underlying falling out of bed during that period out there, which, again, you could hedge against with other ways, buying put spreads or things like that. But intriguing stuff. Before we roll out of here really quickly, because we're having fun talking about ETPs. Who knew BITX? Such a treasure trove of riches, Greg. We have to start adding it to the show. I'm looking at the long-term chart of it here. It's been an intriguing one. It was kind of, like you're right, kind of treading water all the way until January of this year. I wonder what happened January of this year in the Bitcoin space, Greg. That could have lit BITX afire here, but it has a high of about $60, listeners. That came actually back in March, on March 13th, and trading right around $45 right now out there. So if you're intrigued, if BITO isn't doing it for you, then maybe a little BITX will scratch that itch. Speaking of scratching that itch, certainly on the volume front, and indeed on the volatility front, Mara, once again, rampaging, $19.50 right now, down 3.25 since our last show. The ADV, 264,000. So again, you're talking a different ball game than the BITOs and BITXs. This is a very liquid name. It's up 11,000. It used to do 400,000 contracts a day. So this name's on the rampage, doing 226,000. So again, decent volume out there, and volatility at a 95, down about 11 points out there. In terms of size positions, it's again the upside. I talked about these before, these June 30s, 31,000 of those, and also about 27,000 of the June 50s. So it looks like there could have been a vertical out there. Greg, I know you're not the biggest Mara fan. Has this one intrigued you at all since last we chatted in terms of just volume and volatility? It has it in spades, but obviously also not a pure one-to-one Bitcoin play.
Yeah, there's definitely something here. Again, I still haven't started looking at Mara, following it very closely, but I definitely think it's an interesting trading vehicle, especially just from the higher beta, from the amount of volume it has, the liquid options market, the high implied vol in the options market. There's definitely a ton of stuff to do here, but it's not some. It's kind of like an altcoin to me. Like I haven't taken the time to learn all the fundamentals. So I don't know how confident I am in trading it, but if there's some sort of altcoin exposure or alt asset, crypto asset exposure, definitely seems like a very interesting trading vehicle with a lot of opportunity.
Speaking of altcoin, we've buried the lead long enough, listeners. It is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, listeners, let's go explore what's lighting it up outside of the big dog, which is Bitcoin, except for right now when we talk about a market cap out here. This has always been a fascinating discussion to have. We could do a whole little segment just on this every week, and people would tune in because there's a lot of evolution, especially on that bottom half. Number 10, listeners, Toncoin, Greg's other favorite outside of BITX, good old Toncoin, getting kicked all the way to number 10. Getting shown the door here, listeners. Toncoin, 16 billion worth of market cap, still managing to cling to its spot though in the top 10. Number 9 is Cardano, just managing to trump Toncoin with 16.1 billion. Then number 8, our old friend Dogecoin, climbing the ranks again, 23.1 billion worth of market cap. Number 7, XRP, 28.8 billion. Number 6, USD Coin, 32.5 billion. Number 5, it's Solana, 75.9 billion. Number 4, BNB, 92 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, because of course it is, 112.2 billion. Number 2, you know what it is, it's ETH, 453 billion. And the big dog, Bitcoin, 1.36 trillion out there. But let us not delay any further. Let's get to what brought you to the dance. It's ETH, having quite the run since our last show, listeners. We're at 31.48 on our last show. 37.87 coming into the start of the show today, up 639 handles to be precise. It had a high of nearly 4K, 39.74. Maybe on some venues it did print there ever so briefly, but 39.74 is what we're showing here. The low of about 3,050. So again, 1,000 handle range almost since our last show. What could have driven that? Well, of course, all the madness with the ETF approval. And I do mean madness here, Greg, because it does seem like heading into it, the bias, the news was leaning the other way. Everyone's saying, oh, SEC is really not loving. That what was driving some of those lows out there. Then all of a sudden, bam, they come out and say, yeah, we're kind of open to that. So you're right, a little bit of topsy-turviness out there on the regulatory front. What's been catching your eye in ETH over the last few weeks, sir?
Yeah, exactly. So obviously that news caught everyone off guard. So one of the things that's very interesting is that, from an initial reaction, we should expect ETH to test new all-time highs, which would put ETH pretty close to the $5,000 mark, considering that Bitcoin is at all-time highs, and sort of the fundamental catalysts behind Bitcoin have now proved to be true for Ethereum as well. So that's kind of a very interesting initial bias. But what I'm kind of seeing in the data is that we've seen kind of a few things. First off is the open interest in the futures market reacted very quickly to this move. So we have essentially the futures market open interest going from, say, 8 billion to about, call it 13 billion on the news. So quite a nice buildup in open interest. But unlike Bitcoin, the CME open interest, which is a great proxy for like U.S. investors and U.S. institutions, the open interest for Bitcoin in CME is sort of the biggest of all the venues, bigger than Binance, bigger than Bybit, so on and so forth. But in Ethereum, it's actually really small. So it's actually about a fourth of the Binance open interest and about maybe half of the Bybit, and really only about maybe 15% of the total open interest, whereas Bitcoin is more like 30% of the total. And so to me, that either says two things. One is, hey, look at all this room for Ethereum to rally higher because institutions haven't bought yet. That's one perspective. The other perspective is that maybe there just isn't that same type of demand from the US investors for Ethereum as there is for Bitcoin. So that's a little bit of a bearish perspective. So that's kind of interesting. And in the vol space, really what we've seen pretty much all of 2023 and the first half of 2024 is that the implied vol of Ethereum and Bitcoin are about the same. So if I look at DVol, which is Deribit's Bitcoin VIX and Ethereum VIX, if I look at the ratio of the two, they traded about even up until the ETF announcement 2 weeks ago. And now ETH is trading at about a 30% premium to Bitcoin vol. So now I'm thinking, okay, the implied vol market and in the futures Delta One market are both sort of front running ETH, testing new all-time highs, and everything's gotten pricey because of it. And so now I'm thinking maybe this is more of a fade than anything else. Maybe you sell Ethereum implied vol and use the proceeds to buy some Bitcoin implied vol, some sort of relative vol trade, or you monitor the futures open interest to see if the people who just increase their levered long exposure end up puking it if we don't, kind of break above 4K. So those are kind of the way that I would think about it here. I think my bias, like Bitcoin, is still a higher bias, like higher prices bias, but how fast we get there is really what determines the options implied vol premium, whether it's justified or not.
Interesting. You've been an ETH holder for as long as I've known you on this show. That's always been, as far as I know, your number one crypto favorite. I did not expect you coming on here heading towards an approval and talking about the Great ETH Fade, Greg. So you threw me a curveball there, which I like. I always like that. So you're just heavily short all things ETH right now. You just short the house, bet the farm, short just everything you can, any bid you can find, you're hitting it.
That is not quite, but just to be clear, I'm not necessarily. I don't think necessarily spot prices are a fade. I just think like the vol market is a little ahead of itself. The vol market is priced for perfection, is how I'm thinking about it right now.
I may have read between the lines a little bit there. I may have inserted a little bit of bias in there. Just maybe, listeners. Fade the vol. Interesting out there in ETH land. I thought you were going to be saying buy the upside, buy the ETH with two hands, Greg, but judicious. That's all we always like that out here when it comes to vol, because things can get overpriced in the near term, listeners, and you don't want to be left holding the bag out there. Let's talk about that near term. Let's see what's going on out there. Let's start on the vol front. On our last show, weekly vol was at about a 62, so still fairly frothy and certainly a good premium to the weekly Bitcoin vol, which is hanging out in the mid 40s right now. Coming in a little bit again, that gentle vol drift we were talking about, even impacting ETH, 57.5 right now. A 30-day vol, again, a more standardized metric. That one kind of interesting. Maybe going to what Greg's talking about here a little bit. 61.5 on our last show, 63.5, so ticking up 2 points out there, which is kind of fascinating. And the same can be said for the longer-term vol, a 70.3 6-month vol 2 weeks ago. This week, 71.65, so ticking up about 1.35 points out there. Maybe the ETH market pricing in maybe a little bit more turbulence down the road, maybe also going back to maybe a good time to fade said vol. Let's go out to the skew, see what it's telling us out there. Last week, the skew was mostly flat on the weekly front, about almost a positive one, about a 0.9. This week, ticking up 5.5 points. So folks liking themselves a little bit of upside bias, at least in the near term here for ETH. Going a little bit farther out, we're at a 4.88 to be precise on the 30-day skew. 2 weeks ago, this week, 4.38. It's coming in exactly half a point. And the longer-term skew 6 months, 6.4 on the last show, 5.9. So still pretty frothy out there. Greg, does all that line up with your fade argument? The fact that we're seeing a little bit firmer 30-day vol and also still a bit of a bias to the upside. Does that line up with fade and a little bit of vol in the near term?
Yeah, exactly. I think everyone is thinking the same way that, ETH should break above 4K. If it breaks above 4K, it should test year-to-date highs. If it gets to year-to-date highs, theoretically, it should break them because there's more fundamentals, so it should take us to all-time highs. and that takes us to 5,000. And I think the market's priced that in.
The Great ETH Fade coming to a trading screen near you, listeners. Let's go out there to see what's cooking some of the other altcoin that's catching our eye out there. And Solana is certainly one of them these days. A little bit beefier on our last show than it is now. 179.71 on the last show, 165.41 this week. So down about 14.3 handles over the last couple of weeks. 7-day vol, again, collapsing. 91 on the last show, 60. Again, 7-day vol, a very quote-unquote volatile measure. So bear that in mind out there. But coming in quite a bit. 7-day skew as well, also coming in. Actually, I should say 7-day skew ticking up. 335 on the show last week, 7 even this week. So maybe showing there's maybe a little bit of hope for some rebounding out there in the near term. Again, it's only 7 days, so read into that with a bit of a grain of salt. Greg, I know you were like me. You were hoping for maybe a little bit more data to sink our teeth into out there on the Solana front. Still kind of hard to pull together a 30-day vol number or even 30-day skew out there. Is mostly a weekly stuff. Anything catching your eye out there on the Solana front? And are you also maybe hoping for a little bit more on the data side, sir?
Yeah, still hoping for a little bit more on the data side. I do think, the altcoin fundamentals right now are around Ethereum. I don't think we're going to get a spot Solana ETF anytime soon. But Solana's just been a higher beta asset, so it's still an interesting altcoin play. Like if I was going to trade altcoin options, I would choose Solana options over XRP or Matic, which are coins I just never think about. So I do think that's pretty interesting for Solana. And it's been an asset that's performed really, really well. And so this pullback is a nice area for people to essentially get in if they've missed out. So I do think we'll have some more Solana upside and some really interesting upside plays to be done in the future.
You can admit it to us here, Greg. It's a safe space. You love Toncoin. We know you. You know you love your Toncoin. You were sad that it got bumped down to number 10 this week. I could see your virtual tears coming in during the show. Let's see if we can cheer Greg up, listeners, with some other altcoin rundowns before we get out of here for this week. XRP, I don't know why we bother including it week after week. I could just guess right now, 52 cents, and there's a pretty good chance I'm probably right. Yep, 52.2 cents. 2 weeks ago, 51.9 cents. Huge evolution. I feel for you, XRP holders. I know this was the hot one. This was the Solana of its day back a few years ago, and it had a nice quick run. Then it kind of has been locked in this regulatory limbo ever since, and locked at pretty much 52 cents since time immemorial, it seems, and unfortunately no change there. Our friend Doge, who said climbing the ranks, 15.2 cents 2 weeks ago, 16 cents this week, so managing to climb that rakes all the way up to number 8. Litecoin, 83.96 2 weeks ago, 83 and a quarter this week, down almost 3/4 of a point. Cardano, 47 cents 2 weeks ago, 45 cents this week, down a whopping 2 cents. Polkadot, 7.15 2 weeks ago, 7.11, so kind of unched there. And Greg's other favorite, outside of Toncoin, a little bit of Shiba Inu, actually looking unched on the week, which is a rare accomplishment for them. Before we roll out of here, any other altcoin lighting up your wallet these days you want to share with the folks?
Well, actually, yes. So BitMEX just launched their own options offering. And along with that options offering, they offer Dogecoin options, which is really interesting. Because in my mind, there's really two good arguments on either side of the Dogecoin argument. On the one side, we have, hey, is Elon Musk going to add Dogecoin as a payments layer to X? If so, Dogecoin probably just triples in prices in like 2 seconds. And optionality to the upside is a great way to play that. But then there's the other argument that if I regress Dogecoin versus Ethereum over the past 18 months, they both have had the exact same performance, but Dogecoin has twice the volatility. And so with that side of the argument, there's, it has a lower Sharpe ratio of it, essentially, and it has a nice, highly correlated asset of Ethereum next to it. And so from that point, vol's probably an interesting fade. And from the other side of the argument, well, implied vol is cheap because Elon might add it to X. So I think this is a really interesting place for option trading to occur, is Dogecoin options.
Well, Greg, you get pride of place. I don't think anyone's ever talked to me about the Sharpe ratio of Doge before. That's certainly a first. So that's why we like bringing you on the show, Greg. You have these fun data points. I know there's going to be some hardcores in our audience who are deeply offended that you're talking about options on a 15-cent underlying, but that's where we are. That's the setup out there. Some people below $10, they don't want to touch it. Below $5, certainly they're done. 15 cents, let alone the Sharpe ratio of Doge. I love that. Unfortunately, that music means we've come to the end of another fun journey through the world of all things Doge and indeed crypto, listeners. But before we go, Mr. Greg, we talked about AmberLens. You folks have been busy cranking away. Anything else you want to let the folks know about before we go? Now is the time, sir. The floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, AmberLens is a free platform, and you can find it at intelligence.amberdata.com. Then you can also check out our derivatives analytics GUI, which is pro.amberdata.io. And then lastly, you can read some of our weekly commentary on the crypto derivatives market at amberdataderivatives.substack.com.
There you go. Check them out there, listeners. You can begin your journey, amberdata.io, and of course, hit up all the other URLs he just mentioned out there. Definitely check out the newsletter if you're looking for some insights in between episodes of this show. A lot of fun data points, including the Sharpe ratio of Doge, to be found out there. That's going to do it for us, though, on the network today. Back again tomorrow, doing triple duty out there tomorrow, including we got the folks in public joining us to talk about what they have cooking on the options front, so that should be fun, as well as a pro Q&A with our buddy, Mr. Matt from Orats. You folks always love to put questions to him about all sorts of back testing on whatever strategy, covered calls, puts, calendars, you name it, junk options. Matt loves to back test it, so that'll be a fun one over there tomorrow. Wednesday, of course, back again with a little bit of options education with Options Bootcamp. Thursday, This Week in Futures Options, which again, if you want to hear more about what Greg was talking about with some of the ETH futures and everything else going on at CME, tune into This Week in Futures Options, as well as, of course, the option block with our buddy, the Flow Master there from SIBO and everybody else. Friday, Volatility Views. Who's going to join us this week? Got to tune in to find out. And then Options Oddities for all the pro folks out there. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to get that show. Then we're back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Crypto Rundown is brought to you by Amberdata. If you're entering the digital asset class, you'll need access to granular on-chain and market data from multiple venues to power research, trading, risk management, and compliance. Amberdata delivers comprehensive data and insights into blockchain networks, crypto markets, and decentralized finance, empowering financial institutions to apply traditional finance methods to digital assets. Amberdata eliminates the infrastructure setup, integration challenges, and maintenance headaches to access digital asset data, reducing cost and time to market to enter the digital asset class. Learn more and download their digital asset data guide at www.amberdata.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.